Hi there, Paul Kirtley here, and today I want to talk to you about how I optimize the way that I carry a ferro rod in my pocket. And I want to be able to deploy that quickly. I want to minimize the chances of losing it, and also stick around towards the end of the video. I'm going to share some extra tips of how I optimize my pocket organization that includes a ferro rod. Okay, so here's a brand new ferro rod in the packet. This is one of the Strikefire Ferro Rods. This is one of the several different types of ferro rods that I like. This has been in the packet for a little while, a little bit of corrosion on it, but nothing wrong with it at all. And this is typically how ferro rods come. They come with the rod, there's a bit of lacquer on it to stop any great corrosion, and then there's some sort of striker, and the strikers vary, and then they're connected with a piece of string. And this piece of string is actually, this piece of cord is actually reasonably long, but what you'll find is that when they're doubled over like that, that they're a little bit restrictive in how you can use them. The cord kind of stops. Now this isn't too bad, but that to me is particularly the way I like to hold them, with my hand around there. That cord's a little bit restrictive, so I don't like leaving it like that. I see a lot of people just leave it like that and then they clip it on to their pocket somehow like that, but there's a better way of doing it, and the simplest better way of doing that is get a longer piece of cord. All right, and this is the most simplistic way of doing it. I'm going to share some more sophisticated and maybe nuanced ways of doing this, but this is the least sophisticated way, but the most simple way. Get a longer piece of paracord, take your striker and the ferro rod, and then put them both onto a longer piece of string, and then you can tie that over. That's just an overhand knot, and then you can use them with no limitation on how far you want to strike, even if you want all of that cord in your hand, depending on how you hold it. The other advantage to that, and I've talked about kind of attaching things to belts before, is that you can then easily take this, pop it up through and under your belt, make basically a lark's foot or a cow hitch, whatever you want to call it there, and then that will go in your pocket, and it will go deeply into your pocket because the cord's long enough. Okay, and I do that around the belt, not around the belt loop, because belt loops can easily be ripped. They're just stitched on with a little bit of stitching. This is attached to your belt. It will not come off there, and that is there. Now the downside of doing that is that you've got to take the whole thing off to use it. Now I've got orange string and orange ferro rod, I'm less likely to lose it, but I've got to take the whole thing off, which can be a bit awkward, particularly if you've got more layers on. It's still quite warm today, even though I'm filming this in late September. It could be cooler, and I might have multiple layers on, I might have a jacket on. Getting all of this off my belt then starts becoming a bit more of a pain in the backside. So let's look at some better ways of doing this. Okay, so let's start with this brand new ferro rod here. Okay, so I am going to take this off, and this has just got an overhand knot at the top. Now overhand knots have the advantage that they'll stay reasonably well closed, but you can undo them. So we'll start by thinking about that. I'm going to put that down there for a minute, and I'm going to get a length of paracord. So I'm going to do the same sort of thing as I had before. You know, what is that? That's maybe about 3.5 feet, maybe a bit more. But you want a good loop like that. Okay, I'm going to cut that. And now we want to just tidy up the ends of one, because that's all frayed. Put that away, I'll take that home with me, don't want to leave it lying around in the woods. And okay, I'm going to melt the ends here. One of the things I often have in my pocket is a lighter, but of course you can do this at home. You're going to be doing this at home or in the workshop before you go out to the woods. But we're just going to melt the ends, and you want to melt the ends so they're not too blobby. You don't want massive blobs of molten paracord on the end. There's a reason for that, you'll see in a second. But you want to seal the ends so they don't fray. like so. Do that in a well ventilated space. Yeah, the fumes that you get from melting cord are not particularly good for you. So do that in a well ventilated space, probably in the backyard, definitely with a window open. Okay, so I've got my piece of cord there with the ends melted. All right, now often you'll have seen me, I use my ferro rod with my knife. There's lots of different techniques. I'm not going to go into that here. Of course, we need to get the brand new lacquer off this, but I often use my knife with a ferro rod. But I don't always, and I may just be hiking and have a Swiss Army knife in my pocket, or a locking folder that maybe doesn't have an edge on it other than the cutting edge that's going to create a spark. And so I do typically like to carry the striker as well, even though I don't use it so often necessarily. It's there in case I need it. So I'm going to put both of those onto my cord, and that's the basic setup that we just talked about. And this might be a little bit long, but we can shorten it in a minute. Okay, that's the basic setup. But as I say, the issue is you've got to take the whole thing off your belt. So what I want to do is I'll have the striker on the cord permanently affixed, but what I'm going to do, there's a couple of options here, is I'm going to create some sort of quick release. All right, now I like to use these little clips here, which you can get from Amazon in packs. They come in a few different sizes. They're called mini carabiners. I'll link to them below. It is an affiliate link. I'll earn about 1 penny on it if you buy some, but that all helps. And these are what I use. These are bought from Amazon. There's a couple of different sizes. They're like a mini carabiner. Don't know if you can see that. Let me just focus the camera there. These ones are black. They come in silver as well. Little mini carabiner. That is something that I like to use. Okay. Now what I then do is I take the clip and put it, and this is why you don't want big knobby bits, because that's even a little bit too knobby there to get there. I can get it on that side probably, and if not, no, it won't go on that side. If not, what you do is you just take a knife and just remove anything that's not flush with the diameter of the cord without diminishing the ability for the end of the cord to stay together and not fray. Okay, now I've got my clip on there. All right, so that's got my clip on there next to the striker. Now I want to be able to clip my ferro rod onto that. So what I then need, got a bag of bits and pieces here. I want a split ring like you get on a key ring, like so. Okay, and what I'm going to do, this might be a bit tricky, but once it's on there, is you take the split ring and you feed your ferro rod onto the split ring. Okay, make sure that you haven't overly bent the split ring. You want it to be nice and tight. You don't want the ferro rod coming off it. Then what I can do is I can clip that onto there, and it'll come off and it'll go back on. And you've probably seen me do this in videos, but you might not have known what I was doing. Okay, now I can clip that onto there, which means, okay, I'll take that off there. I'll tie this just with an overhand at the moment. I'm going to show you a more permanent way of tying that off. Just put an overhand there. Right, now I can put that on my belt. Put that through there, and I can clip my ferro rod on like so. I've got my striker there if I need it. It all goes in my pocket. Okay, now this comes out. I can unclip my ferro rod. Yeah, even if I've got more layers on, I don't have to get up into my belt here and untuck my shirt by accident and things. And now I've got my ferro rod, and I can use it with my knife if I want to, which is typically the way that I use it. All right, and then that can go back on there. Equally, I can use it with the striker even when it's still attached to my belt, and I can take the whole thing off and use it like that, as we discussed before. So I've got more flexibility there as well. Now the other thing that I like to do with this setup is add a few things to this cord, because this is always in my pocket. So even though some of these Some of these strikers, like the Swedish ones, this Light My Fires, have a little whistle in them. I can get it to work. It's not super loud, and some of the strikers, like these, don't have a whistle in them. So just what I like to do is take a really loud whistle, like a soccer referee's whistle, these Fox 40 whistles, P-less whistles, so there's no P, it's nothing to break. These are super loud, and I like to put one of these on. Now you can keep the split ring and just put it down. You might need to bore out the center slightly more to get it directly onto the cord, but we can put the split ring on there. Okay, so what I like to do is put that on there, have a whistle, then I've always got a whistle on my person, put that on there, and then the other thing I like to do is generally put another clip on, and that's just for whatever. I can clip my car keys on there if I'm out for a day hike. They can clip extra things on there. I generally like to get it the same orientation as the other one, so I'll show you. So I've got them both clipping and unclipping the same way there, like so. So I've got two clips on there. I'll have my whistle on there. You could have a whistle on the clip, but I like to just keep it on the cord. So I've got those things. And then what you might also want is some sort of light, some sort of illumination. Now a lot of people like these micro lights just as a sort of everyday carry. You can't really see it very brightly. We're in the daylight, but that will fit on a piece of paracord as well. A lot of people carry those around their neck. I find they get really greasy, and I get really greasy when I have them around my neck, and so I tend to like them. You can put them on there as well. The other thing, of course, you can do is carry something a bit more substantial. The little baton style lamps, super bright. They're quite handy. Single CR123 battery, and that's something. Now I tend not to slide that onto the cord. I put a tiny little split ring on that. They come with a little lanyard, which I don't like very much. I wish there was a more substantial, that's the one thing I wish about this, there was a more substantial attachment point on here somehow, or that you could thread a cord through it somehow or clip onto it directly. But what I like to do with this, I'm just going to tie this off, is be able to clip. This is one of the things I can clip on and off if I want to. If I want to have that in my pocket, I can just clip that on and off in the same kind of pocket full of stuff. So there's some things on there. Now I would avoid kitchen sinking it, like just hanging every single conceivable thing that you could think of ever wanting. I think the main thing here is it's about having your ferro rod handy and secure. I think having a whistle on you is always sensible, and having some sort of light on you, even if you're carrying a headlamp or a head torch, it's good to have a secondary light. I'm probably going to click the O light on this, so I'm going to leave this little micro light off because I'm going to make this permanent now. All right. Now everyone's a bit different. Everyone's got different size. You might have a different size belt. You might have different depth trouser pocket that you want to fit this into. I would caution against having it. Don't have it hanging down to thigh pockets. You want it in this pocket so that it doesn't catch on anything here, and you want it attached to your belt. Now, as I say, you can just overhand that with a tail on it, and that will stay fastened. Right, that won't come undone very easily, but it's a little bit messy, and you've got these tails. And if you want to keep this permanent, what you can do is use an overhand knot in a slightly different way and create a fisherman's knot. Okay, so we're gonna, and I've talked about this before, I'll link to a video where I talk about this in more detail, but I'm going to do an overhand knot there, and I'm going to do an overhand knot on the other side around each piece, so you end up with two overhand knots around the other part of the loop that slide together, and if you pull that super tight, it will not come undone. Okay, and we can make that even a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, if you like, and we can do a double fisherman's like so, and we can put very short tails on that like so. I know this is hard to see, I'll show you in a second. So it's like a thumb knot with a very short tail there. So do the same on the other side, and as I say, I've done a separate video on doing this somewhere. I'll try and link to that as well. going to do very short tail on this here, like so, and I can pull those together into one lump, and that's then going to be very tidy. I'm just shortening that off because, as I say, once this is pulled tight, there's the knot. You can see it's all very tidy, short tails. Pull that really tight there. Okay, that's going to be very difficult to undo, even if you want to, and it won't come undone unintentionally. Okay, and there's less little tail sticking out. It's all very tidy, and you can actually even just pull that round out of the way, then like so, so that when you're putting it over your belt, none of the knot is getting in the way or getting caught on anything as you slide the cord underneath, like so. Okay, and there's my stuff. I've got it handy. It's long enough that I can bring it out in front of me. I can choose the thing that I want off my belt, off my cord. It can go back in. It gives me a little bit of extra spare paracord if I really need it as well, maybe for a bow drill. If it was a really bad situation and I'd lost my ferro rod. But the whole intention of this is that you keep your ferro rod. And you'll have noticed that when I light fires, if you watched any videos of me, I'll get it out of my pocket, I'll light the fire, I'll spark, I'll do what I need, and then this goes back, knife goes back in the sheath, this goes back on here. And it's the other advantage of the clip is you don't have to faff around with belts and loops and things. It's the loop's already attached to you. Clip the ferro rod on, back in your pocket, carry on managing your fire. Yeah, we've all seen those shows where, the survival shows where people have lost ferro rods. We've probably heard stories about people losing ferro rods. Or wilderness trips, if I'm on my own, I will have a spare ferro rod in my kit as well. I typically carry at least one secondary method of fire lighting on me. We've talked about methods of lighting fires, talked about things like the X-Attack sleeves, the fire sleeve. We've talked about the match cases before. They're good things to have on you as well, but the primary thing here, and actually the primary thing that I use to light fires, like stoves, all sorts of things, most of the time is a ferro rod. So I want to make sure it's attached to me very securely, and I also want to make sure I can get it out, deploy it, use it, put it back quickly, so that I'm not tempted to put it on the ground while I'm adjusting my fire. I minimize the chances of losing it that way. Okay, a couple of other things for you to think about. Some people like to use these style of clips. Don't know if you've seen these. They've got like a little push here, so you have to push and then it releases a couple of pins, a couple of little balls, and it comes out of the socket here. Okay, so it's secure, and then you squeeze it and it comes out. So you can attach your ferro rod with one of those if you want to. So you could say, take the split ring, put this one through. It's just reversed, so it does take me a second. Feed that on without distorting it. This would be attached to your cord, and then you can just take your ferro rod off, clip your ferro rod back on. Some of my colleagues quite like these. Personally, I find it's a little bit too, because I like a couple of clips for different things, it's too much. I find it's too much stuff in my pocket. It starts to feel like there's quite a lot of lumpy bits in there. Particularly this is kind of quite long. So this is a perfectly valid option. I think it's quite nice, particularly if you're just mainly using it for your ferro rod. But because I like having multiple things attached, I prefer using, that's the largest thing that I use. That's one of the larger mini carabiners. And then you've got these teeny weeny ones as well, like so, which are the ones that I put on the demo one that I just showed you how to do it. Those are the two different ones. But they're all valid, it's just what works for you. I think the key thing is you have something that's permanently attached, you can remove the ferro rod quickly. Perhaps you have something else attached on there as well that's just handy and convenient. And then that's what I've got in my pocket at the moment: ferro rod, striker, whistle, and a clip for attaching something else to. And as I say, I can attach my S1 baton on there as well, and it's not too bad then just to have in the old pocket. That's about as much as I would want in that pocket. Now, another thing just to mention, some people say to me, Paul, yeah, I don't really like having the strikers in my pocket because they've got a burr on them, they've got quite a sharp edge, and they're going to wear a hole in my pocket, and then I'd risk losing things out of my pocket. And that's a valid point. They are quite sharp to start off with, the burrs. So the simple solution to that, particularly if you're not using that very often, and therefore it's going to stay sharp for a long time, and also you don't really need access to it unless you don't have your belt knife. If you're just using your belt knife the whole time, just take a piece of duct tape or similar, and then take your striker and then just wrap the end, just a little bit of duct tape, and you can. And this isn't like some super clever way of carrying duct tape. It literally is just to cover off those sharp edges, and then that'll stay in your pocket without causing any damage to the lining of your pockets or the other things that are in your pocket. Taking the anodization off your torch or what have you. Okay. So yeah, that's another little tip for you. So that brings it to a close. How I set up a ferro rod and a few other bits of kit for my pocket so that I can keep them secure, I can use them rapidly. I'm not tempted to leave things lying around on the ground after I've lit a fire or whatever I'm working with. And I use that when I'm working in the woods teaching bushcraft courses, I use that when I'm running wilderness expeditions, and I use it when I'm doing my own trips as well. And as I say, that will work on its own. That's even if you had nothing else, you can light a fire with that. You can use it when you've just got a pocket knife like a Swiss Army knife, or you can use the ferro rod with your belt knife as well. You've got all the flexibility there and no hindrance, and everything's nice and secure. In another video, make sure you subscribe, because in another video I'm going to show you how I organize my pockets. Sounds mundane to the non-bushcraft or outdoors person, but it's a question I've had quite a few times. I had it back on the Ask Paul Kirtley shows. It's one that I get fairly often. So in a video coming up soon, I'm going to go through my standard kind of bushcraft pocket organization, my pocket load if you like, that forms part of it, but I'll talk about what else I have in addition to the lanyard with the ferro rod, and I'll talk you through that in a future video. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that. Make sure you hit the bell for notifications, and if you like this video, please hit the like, as well as sharing it with other people that might find it useful. And let me know in the comments below what you think of this little setup. If you do anything like this or anything similar, let me know in the comments below. It's always interesting to read your perspectives, and it's interesting for other viewers to read each other's perspectives as well and get some conversations going there as well. Keep it friendly, keep it nice. We're all here to learn, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video before too long. Take care. Cheers.